They thought she was just a trainer in a tank top, until her shirt slipped and a general froze at the tattoo from an operation the Pentagon swore never happened. A unit that didn't exist, a soldier who was supposed to be dead, and a cover-up that could shake the foundations of US intelligence. This is not a story about war. This is a story about the truth they tried to erase, and the woman who came back to burn it all down. Welcome to Veteran Biker, where real honor meets the secrets they never wanted you to hear. Before we dive in, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. Hit subscribe, share this story with someone who still believes in justice, and stick around, because we've got more jaw-dropping stories coming tomorrow. Now buckle up. This one's gonna leave a mark. The desert sun bore down on the military outpost like a silent predator. Dust rose in low golden spirals as boots crunched over gravel and heat shimmered above the rooftops like a mirage that never left. It was training day for the new batch of recruits, and the air buzzed with testosterone and half-learned protocol. A transport vehicle groaned to a halt near the perimeter fence. From the passenger side, a woman stepped down, her boots landing with the kind of heaviness that said she wasn't here to impress. She wore plain khaki cargo pants and a black tank top beneath a loose faded overshirt with no insignia. Her hair was cropped short, revealing a hard jaw and steel-grey eyes that scanned the range like someone measuring distance with nothing but instinct. There was no welcome party, no salute, just a curious glance from the guard who muttered into his radio. A lieutenant approached her with a clipboard in hand. "Eden Wolfe?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze lingered on the recruits lining up near the firing lanes. Boys, most of them, maybe one or two had seen blood, the rest still sharp around the edges. Then she nodded once. "I was told to report for provisional instruction." "That's correct." He checked his list and looked up, brow furrowing. "We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. Plans changed." He gave her a sideways glance. "We have your file, but it's ... thin." Eden didn't flinch. "You'll find I'm sufficient." As they walked toward the open training area, a pair of young recruits stood whispering behind a Humvee. One of them held up a thermal snapshot printed in grey-blue contrast, showing a lone figure dragging what looked like a wounded body out of a collapsed adobe structure in the dead of night. The signature was unmistakably female, short frame, powerful stride. But what caught the other recruit's eye was the glowing thermal shape visible on the back left shoulder. A dark triangle inside a ring, faint but definite. That symbol, it's the same one I saw on her. "You think it's real?" The other recruit snorted. "Don't be stupid. That footage is from a ghost op, never got confirmed. Nobody ever said she came back." "Exactly," the first one murmured. "What if she was never meant to?" A few yards away, an older gunnery sergeant, battle-hardened and perpetually bitter, watched Eden from under his boonie hat. He leaned toward the lieutenant and muttered, "Nobody comes back from Fallujah with no paperwork. She doesn't belong on a training roster." The lieutenant gave him a tight smile. Neither did half of Task Force 121. Still ended a war. "Not like this," the sergeant said. "She moves like someone who's used to walking over bodies, quietly." Eden walked to the firing line without waiting for instructions. The recruits stood aside, half curious, half nervous. She stopped, then gestured toward the range with a small clipped motion. "Who's your best shot?" A lanky kid with an eager face stepped forward, clutching his rifle like it might run away from him. "Private King, ma'am. Good. Step back." She took his place, picked up the same standard-issue sidearm, and looked downrange without even adjusting her stance. 50 meters, wind negligible. She exhaled through her nose, and in one smooth movement, raised the pistol and fired 5 times in quick succession. The echo hadn't died before the paper target fluttered from the impact, 5 holes forming a tight cluster in the exact center of the silhouette's forehead. Silence dropped over the group like a snapped wire. Even the drill instructors didn't speak. Eden lowered the weapon. A slight movement, hardly more than a shrug, caused her overshirt to slide down from her shoulder, just enough to expose part of her upper back. A jagged black triangle sat burned into the flesh just under her left shoulder blade, framed by a weathered grey ring. Beneath it, bold black lettering etched vertically in an unfamiliar code. It took only a second. The gunnery sergeant froze. His skin turned pale beneath the desert sun. His mouth opened, then closed again. He took one step back, then whispered as if to himself, "No, that's not possible." Eden turned her head slowly toward him, eyes steady and unblinking. "Do we have a problem, Sergeant?" He didn't answer, because the last time he saw that tattoo, it had been on the back of a corpse pulled from a burn pit in Kandahar. And that unit? That unit didn't exist. The whispers spread like wildfire. No one spoke openly, but everyone saw it. The ink, the shape, the near-mythical sigil scorched into flesh. The symbol of something unspoken, like a story passed through gritted teeth between men too broken to sleep at night. The recruits fidgeted. A few turned their eyes away from Eden, as if prolonged contact might invite ghosts. Eden reached over and adjusted her overshirt, covering the tattoo again, slowly, deliberately. She didn't seem rushed, didn't seem phased. If anything, she looked bored. "You done staring?" she asked, calm as stone. The gunnery sergeant blinked. "Where did you get that tattoo?" She cocked her head slightly. "Wrong question. Then what's the right one? Why are you still alive?" Before he could respond, a convoy rolled into the far end of the compound. A matte black SUV halted in a plume of dust. The moment the doors opened, several officers straightened their spines as if electrified. From the passenger side emerged a man whose presence seemed to mute the heat itself. 4 stars glinted beneath his collar. General Halvorsen. He was rarely seen outside Pentagon briefings and had no reason, no published reason, to be at this desolate training ground. Yet here he was, walking past stunned instructors like a ghost in flesh. The gunnery sergeant took one step forward. "Sir, this is highly—" Halvorsen raised one finger, not to silence him, to point at Eden. She stood unmoved, hands behind her back, eyes sharp as ever. He approached her slowly, step by deliberate step, until they stood face to face. He looked older than his photos, grey hair thinned, eyes sunken deeper, but his stare still cut through armor. He didn't salute, didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he asked quietly, "What year?" Eden's reply came flat, "You tell me." He nodded once. It wasn't agreement, it was confirmation. Then, almost imperceptibly, his gaze dropped to her shoulder. He reached out, not quite touching, but close enough that the air between them felt heavy. "You were at Echo Ridge," he whispered. Eden blinked once. They called it Sandfall Delta by the end. A silence fell over them. Then Halvorsen whispered, "I saw the casualty list. You were listed as Kia, and yet," she replied, "here I am." His hands dropped to his sides. The sternness in his posture gave way to something else, something like grief. "I signed off on that mission," he said, so softly that only she could hear. "I gave them the green light, but the It was buried before it even ended. Washington needed clean numbers." Eden took a step closer. "They buried us alive. I know. You knew then." His silence was answer enough. Behind them, murmurs rose among the observing officers. They were seeing something that didn't happen, something not in records, not in files, something that should have been impossible. The recruits stared, clueless but rattled. Eden broke eye contact first, turning toward the stunned circle of soldiers around her. "If you're still waiting for instruction," she said, "start running laps, 5 miles, now." They obeyed without question. As the formation scrambled into motion, Halvorsen watched her. "Why now?" he asked. "Why here?" She turned her back to him, walking away toward the edge of the range. "You brought the cameras," she said over her shoulder. He looked around. and realized with dread that two military journalists stationed at the outpost for recruitment documentation were filming the range from a tower she had never intended to hide. Halvorsen stood still, lips dry. "You're forcing their hand." "No," she said without turning around. "I'm just letting them remember." The footage was only 13 seconds long, grainy and unfocused from the upper watchtower, but it spread through the base like a viral infection. No one knew who uploaded it, but by dusk, every private and sergeant with a smartphone had already seen it twice. 5 shots, center mass. No hesitation. Then came the moment her shirt slipped, just enough for the triangle and ring to show, stamped like a forgotten seal on her back. Most viewers didn't know what it meant, but a few did. In a closed Telegram channel frequented by former military personnel, someone posted a screen capture of the tattoo. Another account replied with nothing more than a string of numbers, coordinates. Within minutes, there were whispers of a forward operating base in northern Helmand province, long abandoned, wiped from every satellite registry by executive order. Someone mentioned the code name Operation Echo Ridge, and then the message that shifted everything. "I saw that symbol once. 2013. Knew a guy who didn't make it back. He said it belonged to X-12. No one had seen those letters typed out in over a decade. Unit X-12 had become the stuff of dark speculation, a black ops group that allegedly existed for non-attributable extraction missions, meaning if they were caught, they didn't exist. Rumors said they specialized in rescuing hostages, too sensitive for negotiation. Others said they were trained to kill hostages when talks failed. There were no official records, just a handful of fragmented memories from the shadows. By midnight, 2 military news outlets had picked up the story from whispers in online circles. One headline on a restricted forum read, "Unidentified marks on base instructor resemble disavowed unit symbols Eden." Sat alone in the dim break room of the barracks, sipping bad coffee that tasted like scorched rubber. A lone bulb buzzed overhead. Her posture was relaxed, legs stretched out, combat boots crossed at the ankles, but her eyes stayed on the reflection in the microwave door across from her. Movement, not big, not fast, but enough. She stood and crossed the room in silence, yanked the door open. Nothing. A janitor's cart, a narrow hallway to the right, an open door at the far end just barely swaying shut. She moved toward it, not running, not cautious, just moving with the kind of confidence that came from knowing anyone who followed her was either a coward or a killer. By the time she reached the door, the hallway was empty, but someone had been there. A folded piece of paper lay just outside the threshold. She bent down and picked it up. Inside, in block lettering, "You were supposed to stay dead." Eden didn't sleep that night. She didn't even try. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bunk, her elbows resting on her knees, staring at the paper for hours as if the letters might rearrange themselves into a different truth. But they never did. The message was simple. Final. You were supposed to stay dead. By morning, the base had shifted. The atmosphere was tighter, more alert. Officers looked over their shoulders more often. Even the recruits, too green to understand the full depth of what they'd seen, had started whispering like school children who'd heard ghost stories in the dark. She passed 2 of them in the corridor, barely 20, uniforms too clean. One tried to hold eye contact. The other nudged him quickly and muttered something. Eden didn't break stride, but she caught 2 words. "She's marked." At breakfast, the silence around her was deliberate. Recruits filled tables on either side but left a circle of space around her like she carried contamination. Her food sat untouched. She didn't mind. She was trained to endure far worse than social paranoia. It wasn't until mid-morning that the door to her quarters opened without a knock. She didn't move, didn't look up. "I assume you've seen the chatter," said a deep voice, calm, controlled. Eden blinked once before raising her eyes. A man stood in her doorway, tall, built like an old tank, his face weathered and lined. With a heavy limp he made no effort to disguise. His uniform bore no name, no rank, but she recognized him immediately. "Avery," she said. "Been a while," he replied. "You look intact. That makes one of us." He stepped inside and shut the door behind him. No ceremony, no questions about how she was still breathing. Just presence. It was something only men who'd survived the same hell could bring into a room. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly. "You shouldn't have shown that damn tattoo." She narrowed her eyes. "I didn't plan to." Shirt slipped. He gave her a sideways glance. "You never slipped in your life." There was silence between them then, thick with old memory, missions that never made the briefings, bodies that were never named, screams that still echoed behind their eyes when the lights went out. Avery dropped something on the table between them. "A USB drive. What is it?" "Insurance," he said. "All I could download before they wiped the mission archives. Names, coordinates, the original mission profile, unedited. You kept this? Didn't trust the brass then. Still don't." She looked at it like it might bite. "This makes you a target." He smiled, a bitter twist of old wounds. "I was already one the moment I didn't die." Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "They're watching. Not just you. Everyone who came back. All three of us." Eden raised an eyebrow. "Three?" Avery nodded. "Who's the third?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "Someone you thought didn't make it. But they've resurfaced, and they're not on our side anymore." Something cold ran through her chest. Avery straightened. "Time's short. Decide fast. Because this time they're not just erasing files, they're erasing witnesses." He was gone before she could ask more. Just a shadow, leaving behind a truth she wasn't sure she wanted, but knew she couldn't ignore. Not anymore. Eden waited until nightfall. She had no intention of plugging the USB into any base issue system. That would have been suicide. She'd seen what happened to whistleblowers who underestimated digital traps, files loaded with tracking scripts, auto-wipes, silent pings to military intel. She'd buried enough bodies to know. Instead, she powered up an ancient laptop she'd smuggled in under the guise of personal correspondence. No internet, no Bluetooth, no ports exposed, just metal, fan noise, and a keyboard with 3 missing keys. She inserted the drive. At first, there was nothing. Then a blinking cursor followed by a single command line prompt, enter passphrase. Eden didn't hesitate. Omega, Echo, Ridge. The screen flickered, and a directory tree unfolded before her eyes. Folder after folder labeled only by date codes and initials. She clicked the most recent, 130,214x12. Inside, transcripts, location logs, drone feeds, intercepted communications. Some files were corrupted, others were redacted even on the local drive, names blacked out digitally in thick bands of static. But enough remained. She opened the primary document, mission brief, Echo Ridge. Objective, extract priority hostages, read and redacted from compound at coordinates 31.1376 degree N, 64.200, 8 degree E. Operational clause, 9 billions, if extraction deemed unfeasible, initiate fail-safe protocol. Her eyes narrowed. She scrolled further. Fail-safe protocol. All persons within AO designated hostile assets. Collateral clearance authorized. Silence above survival. She sat back in the chair, jaw tightening. They hadn't gone in to save anyone. They'd gone in with pre-approved clearance to kill everyone, including the hostages, if resistance was too strong. The entire OP had been a front, a theater production for international allies to say, "We tried." Except Eden hadn't followed the protocol. She remembered the 2 hostages. Civilians? Maybe, but one of them had whispered the right call sign in Pashto. She'd recognized it, hesitated, and instead of pulling the trigger, she'd pulled them out. That's when the firefight exploded. She'd been labeled Kia the next morning. Her hands hovered over the keyboard. The truth was sitting there, archived, fragile, waiting to burn the whole lie to the ground. But before she could reach for the next file, her laptop screen flickered. Not from a virus, from a surge. The room lights dimmed. A thud came from outside the barracks. Someone had cut the power, and they were coming. Eden shut the laptop with a snap, grabbed it one-handed, and slid the USB drive out with practiced precision. No panic. Just motion. Her boots hit the floor silently as she crossed the room in 2 strides, flicked off the last light manually, and crouched near the edge of the door. The footsteps came fast. 3, maybe 4 bodies. No unnecessary chatter. Not MPs, not standard patrol, professionals. She slid the USB into the hidden pocket sewn beneath her waistband. It pressed against her hip like a loaded trigger. The door handle jiggled. She moved before it opened. Out the side window, barely wide enough to squeeze through, but she'd trained for tighter escapes in darker places. Her shoulder scraped the frame as she dropped silently into the alley behind the barracks, landing in a crouch between stacked crates and generator exhausts. The hum of backup power flickered to life across the compound, yellow lights replacing the sterile fluorescence. That meant Central was rebooting manually. She had maybe 90 seconds before they triangulated her position. She moved low and fast across the compound's blind spots, navigating with the ease of someone who'd memorized topography under pressure. She didn't head for the perimeter. Too obvious. She cut toward the motor pool, toward the one place no one would expect her to hide, the wreckage bay. Inside, forgotten Humvees sat in disrepair, stripped for parts, their bodies dark and skeletal. She crawled beneath the one closest to the wall, tucked the laptop into an oil-stained tarp, and waited. Boots thundered past the entrance 30 seconds later. A voice barked orders, urgent, clipped, no radios used. They weren't here to detain her, they were here to erase her. She waited until the sound faded, then slid out and took the long way back, ducking between shadows and fuel drums until she reached the abandoned comms tower. The interior reeked of dust and disuse, but the door locked from the inside. Only when she secured the latch did she exhale. Eden sat on the floor, back to the wall, pulled the USB from her waistband, and stared at it for a long moment. The drive felt heavier than it had earlier. Avery had said there were 3 left. Now she was sure, whoever the third was, they were already working against her. And worse, whoever had sent those men tonight had access to movement logs and security overrides. That meant one thing. Someone inside the base had sold her out. And this time, they weren't afraid of making her death look like an accident. The sun rose on the base like any other morning, but something in the air had shifted. There were no alarms, no official bulletins, no roll calls out of place. But eyes lingered longer, officers whispered in tighter circles, patrols doubled near the barracks, and Eden's name was suddenly absent from the duty roster, scratched out without comment. The base had become quiet in the way a jungle goes silent before an ambush. From the window of the abandoned comms tower, Eden watched the movements with surgical focus. She counted rotations, patterns, the frequency of drone sweeps overhead. Whoever had ordered her disappearance hadn't accounted for her old instincts. She didn't need confirmation. Last night's assault was proof enough. They knew she had the files. They just didn't know where she was or where she'd hidden them. Downstairs, she unwrapped the laptop from its oil-soaked shroud and powered it with a jury-rigged battery pulled from a broken field radio. The screen blinked to life slowly, like something reluctant to wake. She opened the next set of decrypted files from the USB. This time, helmet cam footage. It began in chaos. Dust, screaming, gunfire. Her own voice, younger, barking orders in a whisper. Left flank, cover fire, secure the civvies. The camera jolted as its owner sprinted toward a half-collapsed door, followed by an explosion of shrapnel and flame. She remembered that day. She remembered who died next. Then the camera turned and froze on a face. Avery, bleeding, shouting, dragging a hostage over rubble with one hand while firing blind with the other. But that wasn't the shock. The shock was the man behind him, another operator, gun raised, not at the enemy, but at Avery's back. She paused the frame. The face was blurry, dusty, distorted, but recognizable. Captain Reese Turner, officially Kia in Echo Ridge, unofficially someone Eden saw crushed under debris in the final blast, but this footage was seconds before that moment, before the blast, and in his hand, a remote trigger. She leaned forward. Avery was wrong. There wasn't just a third survivor, there was a traitor. Eden replayed the footage, this time frame by frame. Reese Turner wasn't firing at hostiles. His aim was locked on Avery's spine, finger poised, hesitation flickering, only when the explosion swallowed the screen. She hadn't seen it before. None of them had. The blast had erased the evidence, silenced the witnesses. But the camera, buried with the rest of their gear, must have been recovered and tucked away, deep in the digital catacombs Avery had raided. And now it was hers. She leaned back, breathing slowly, pulse steady. There was no time for outrage, no luxury for disbelief. Betrayal in Black Ops wasn't surprising, but this? Turner had initiated the detonation. He'd activated the fail-safe on his own people, and someone had covered for him, which meant Turner didn't die in Echo Ridge. He disappeared. She copied the footage into a compressed folder and encrypted it with 3 layers of cipher, not just to protect the evidence, but to make sure it could be traced if leaked. Every step she took now had to serve multiple outcomes: survival, exposure, retaliation. Suddenly, her burner radio hissed with static. She froze. The unit wasn't connected to any active channel. No one knew it existed. She reached for it, thumbed the receiver open. A voice cracked through, barely audible. They know. Meet me where the desert drinks the sky. 1 hour. Avery. She cursed under her breath. That meant he was compromised too, or nearly. She packed the laptop, the USB, her sidearm, and a suppressor into her rucksack. Then she took one last look at the paused frame of Reese Turner, that half-snarl frozen in time. She memorized it. By the time she slipped out the back of the tower, the sun had crested the ridgeline and the heat was climbing fast. The desert would bake the truth into her skin if she waited too long. But Eden Wolfe had one more layer of armor now. Not just the files, not just the name of a traitor. She had motive. And someone else had just made the mistake of reminding her how dangerous she used to be. The desert stretched out before her like a dead god's breath. Silent, merciless, endless. Eden moved fast but low, weaving between broken terrain and scattered brush as the sun climbed higher. Her body was a map of old scars, but it still obeyed. Sweat soaked the back of her tank top, salt stinging her eyes. She didn't slow down. The meeting point Avery had mentioned, where the desert drinks the sky, was their old phrase for an abandoned refueling station carved into a gulch 40 minutes outside the base perimeter. It had once served as a black site rest stop for covert transport convoys, long since gutted and forgotten. Only ghosts visited now. She arrived with 7 minutes to spare. No sign of Avery. The wind blew dry through the broken roof panels, kicking sand across rusted tanks and old tire treads fossilized in sun-baked earth. Eden crouched near the only intact wall, back against metal, eyes fixed on the entrance. Then she heard it. 3 distinct clicks, not gunfire, footsteps, deliberate, spaced, one favoring the left leg. Avery. He emerged from the far slope, sweat-soaked and carrying a duffel. His face was grim. darker than when she'd last seen him. No banter, no smirk. He walked straight toward her, unslinging the bag. "Change of plans," he said without preamble. "They're scrubbing everything." Orders came from above top brass. Even my old handler went dark. Eden raised an eyebrow. "How long do we have?" Avery looked her dead in the eye. "Maybe a day, maybe an hour." He opened the duffel. Inside, more than just weapons, satellite photos, printed logs, flash drives, a stack of thin dossiers bound with red string. "Collected it over the last few years," he muttered. "Bits and pieces, patterns, but it didn't fit until I saw that footage last night." Eden's jaw clenched. "Turner." Avery nodded. "He didn't die. He was extracted mid-chaos. Whole op was engineered to fail with us inside, and he was the inside man." She pulled out one of the folders. Inside, surveillance photos. Turner, older, face-fuller, in civilian clothing, shaking hands with a man Eden recognized instantly. General Halvor's son. Her blood ran cold. "It wasn't just a cover-up," Avery said quietly. "It was a trade." Eden stared at the grainy surveillance photo, her jaw tightening as if it might splinter from the pressure. Turner's smile in the image was easy, practiced, the kind men wore when they no longer had to kill in the shadows. Beside him, Halvorsen didn't smile at all. He didn't have to. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that the man who greenlit Echo Ridge extracted the traitor and buried the rest of us with a lie?" Avery nodded grimly. Turner got pulled into deep cover. They repositioned him. New name, new clearance, likely black-budget consulting work in theater. But the handshake? That was no formality. Turner didn't just survive, he made partner. Eden flipped through more files. Financials, logistics, defense contractor transfers, small paper trails most wouldn't catch, but she did. Money had flowed into dummy accounts in the weeks following Echo Ridge. Massive sums. All connected to Halvorsen's sphere of influence. "It wasn't just about us," she murmured. "It was about the op, about what was really at stake." Avery tapped the last folder. "You need to see this." She opened it. Inside were two still images pulled from encrypted footage from the target compound the day of the op, not of the team, not of the hostages, but of two men Eden hadn't noticed in the fog of memory, men in suits. And one of them was unmistakable, the now director of the CIA. Eden's breath caught. He was there? He wasn't supposed to be. The file lists him as a regional attaché nowhere near Helmand. Eden's mind raced. That changed everything. They weren't just hostages. They were assets, possibly rogue, possibly holding secrets too damning to extract cleanly. Turner's job hadn't been to fail the mission. It had been to clean house. No witnesses, no debris, not even the team. Except Eden had broken the chain. She'd pulled those two out. One of them had died days later, but the other had lived, quietly, quiet enough to rise into power. "They buried us to cover for the one man who should have been exposed," she whispered. Avery looked at her. "No," he said, "they buried us to protect the future director of the CIA. You didn't fail the mission. You disrupted the plan." Silence settled between them, heavier than heat. Then Eden stood, fists clenched. "No more silence." Avery grinned. "That's what I wanted to hear." They packed the files with precision, each folder sealed with code locks, each drive wiped of metadata and hidden in false bottom containers. They had no backup, no extraction plan, only truth. And truth, Eden knew now, was more dangerous than bullets. Because this time, she wasn't aiming to survive, she was aiming to burn it all down. The DC air was thicker than Eden remembered, humid, coiled with tension, and humming with invisible agendas. Even the skyline looked heavier, more brittle. But she didn't come to admire the view, she came to strike a match. Avery had secured their entry using credentials from a defunct defense contractor. It was a gamble. layers of fake identities, cross-routed reservations, and a 6-hour window before anyone realized 2 ghosts had checked into a city they were never supposed to return to. The hotel room overlooked the Potomac, sterile and silent. Avery stood at the window, scanning the foot traffic below through a scope lens he'd modified to look like a broken monocle. Eden sat on the edge of the bed with her laptop booting beside her, a burner phone in one hand and a thermal bag containing the USB and physical files in the other. "Contact made yet?" Avery asked without looking back. 2 responses, both indirect. Eden said. "The reporter in Arlington we flagged, she got the first packet. If she's smart, she's printing copies and storing them off-grid right now. And the second?" Eden's voice cooled. "Congressman Tiernan." He replied with 5 words, "Meet me in the chamber." Avery turned. "The whistleblower protection hearing?" Eden nodded once. "Tomorrow morning, full oversight panel, cameras rolling. He wants me in that room." Avery hesitated. "That's exposure. You sure you're ready?" "I'm not going there to be ready," she said. "I'm going to be undeniable." They spent the next 3 hours coordinating upload redundancies, multiple nodes, cloud dead drops, mirrored drives sent to 5 pre-cleared journalists and 2 human rights lawyers. Every click brought them closer to the point of no return. As Eden sealed the final evidence pack, Avery slid an old badge across the table toward her. She picked it up slowly. It was hers. Unit X12, embossed, burnt along the edge, thought lost. "Where did you find it?" she asked. Avery's eyes didn't blink. "Kandahar, 3rd burn pit. Someone tossed it like garbage." Eden closed her hand around the badge. They had buried her once. Now she would make sure they remembered exactly who they tried to erase. Capitol Hill loomed like a cathedral of polished silence. Cameras flashed outside the entrance as the morning hearing drew near, but Eden ignored them all. Her black suit was sharp, unadorned. No military decorations, no unit patches, only a high-collared blouse that framed her eyes like a blade drawn halfway. Inside, the hearing chamber buzzed with staged civility. Lawmakers murmured behind folders, aides shuffled papers and tested microphones. At the far end of the room, Congressman Tiernan sat like a wolf in sheep's posture, calculating, alert. Eden took her seat behind the designated whistleblower table, placing a sealed folder and USB on the surface in full view. No dramatics, no opening statements, just presence. A gavel struck. "The committee will now hear testimony regarding classified military operations conducted without oversight or lawful transparency," the chairman announced. "Ms. Wolfe, you may proceed." Eden rose slowly. She didn't read from notes. Her voice was low but sharp enough to cut through the layered denials. "I was part of a unit that does not exist," she began. "Its designation was X12. We were deployed under black protocols with fail-safe authorizations that superseded basic rules of engagement. During Operation Echo Ridge, we were ordered to execute an extraction. The real mission was execution, not of enemies, but of assets." Murmurs rippled through the room. Eden continued, tone unwavering. "We disobeyed that protocol. We saved 2 individuals. One died days later. The other rose to power. And to preserve his ascension, our unit was buried. Files were erased, witnesses eliminated. The man who gave the order now shakes hands on national television. A screen lit behind her. On it, a still image of Turner and Halvorsen, the same handshake photo. Senators leaned forward. Eden tapped the USB once. "This contains audio logs, helmet cam footage, mission briefings, financial trails, and satellite data. Everything you've never seen, everything I was never meant to carry out alive." Silence. Then Congressman Tiernan spoke. "Do you have any final statement before this committee deliberates?" Eden looked him dead in the eye. "I was willing to die for my country, but I was not willing to lie for it." She sat. A beat passed. Then, from the far corner of the gallery, a figure stood up abruptly, tall, graying, in a tailored civilian suit. "Halvorsen." His jaw clenched, eyes locked on Eden with something between fury and fear, and for the first time in years he looked uncertain. She didn't blink, let him sweat. It had only just begun. The press didn't wait. Within minutes of Eden's testimony, headlines blazed across every military blog, defense watchdog feed, and leak-hungry news site from Arlington to Berlin. Whistleblower accuses 4-star general of Black Ops conspiracy. X-12, the ghost unit that never existed until now. The footage Eden submitted played on loop in underground channels, Turner's face flickering behind grainy cam, the whisper of gunfire, the scream of the explosion, and that single frame where the remote detonator hovered in his gloved hand. Eden watched it all unfold from a safe-house apartment 6 floors above DuPont Circle. Avery paced behind her, speaking in clipped bursts into a burner phone. They're already trying to discredit it. Pentagon just released a statement denying the existence of Unit X-12. Standard protocol, they're buying time. She didn't look away from the screen. Good, that means they're scared. Avery turned. You realize what happens next, right? Yes, Eden said flatly. They'll come after us. No, he said. They'll come after everyone connected to this leak. The reporter. Tiernan. Hell, even the janitor who let us in that chamber. This isn't just exposure, it's collapse. She stood and crossed to the desk, opening a manila envelope. Inside, the last piece of leverage they hadn't used yet. A letter, handwritten, faded, with a signature Eden had memorized in fire and blood. It was from one of the hostages they'd saved, the man who had lived. And it was addressed not to Eden, but to the future director of the CIA. In it, he detailed the truth. The mission was a cover-up. He'd begged Turner for extraction, been denied, and only Eden's rebellion had saved him. Avery leaned over her shoulder. That's a kill switch, she nodded. If they burn everything, this goes to the Intelligence Oversight Committee, with his name on it. You sure you want to hold that much power? She looked up at him. I'm not holding it, she said. I'm aiming it. Nightfall brought no calm, only the kind of quiet that feels like breath held before a storm. Eden sat at the window, overlooking the city pulsing beneath her like a slow-beating heart. Streetlights flickered in rows, and the muted glow of traffic far below looked peaceful, almost deceitfully so. Behind her, Avery methodically cleaned his sidearm on the counter, but his eyes kept drifting toward the apartment door. He didn't trust the lock. Neither did she. Movement near the stairwell, he said quietly. 3rd time in 20 minutes. Same pattern. Eden didn't respond right away. She was holding the envelope again. The letter, not fragile in material, but explosive in consequence. If we drop this, she said softly, we don't control what happens next. Avery exhaled through his nose. We already lost control. All we can do now is steer the wreckage. Eden slid the envelope into a pre-addressed courier bag, sealed it, and placed it gently into a reinforced satchel alongside a backup drive and a signed statement of authenticity. She turned to Avery. Drop point? A courier departs from Union Station at 0600. I already paid off the handler. Once it's gone, it's out of our hands. Eden nodded once. Then her burner phone buzzed. One-word message. Run! Her pupils dilated instantly. She lunged for the blackout panel, flipped the apartment lights to full brightness, not darkness. Shadows kill slower in light. Avery grabbed his bag and moved to the window. 2 vans, blacked out windows, 4 men exiting, no insignia. Not FBI, not military either. Eden checked her holster. Private, contracted. They're not here to arrest us. She smirked darkly. Good. Saves time. The first impact came 5 seconds later. Steel against reinforced door. A battering ram. Avery took position beside the kitchen island, sidearm raised. Eden stood calmly in the middle of the room, hand hovering over the satchel. She wasn't running, not this time. The second impact bent the lock inward. Eden raised her voice, steady and cold. "If you step through that door," she called out, "you'd better have your next of kin on speed dial." Silence. Then a third impact, heavier, more desperate. A crack formed in the wood. She opened the satchel, pulled the courier bag free and turned to Avery. "Window exit? North alley. Rope drop. 20 feet. She nodded and tossed him the bag. "You deliver this. I'll stall them." His eyes flashed with protest, but she was already moving. He swore under his breath, slung the satchel over his back, and sprinted for the window. Behind them, the door finally gave way. 3 men surged in, black masks, suppressed rifles, but Eden Wolfe was ready, and she didn't aim to survive this time. She aimed to expose. The verdict came down like a dropped blade, clean, heavy, and irreversible. General Silas Halverson was officially stripped of rank, denied pension, and indicted on 6 federal charges, including conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and unlawful authorization of extrajudicial operations. The courtroom was sealed. The press only got pieces, but the shockwaves were immediate. Across the Pentagon, long-sealed doors creaked open under new subpoenas. Archived missions, once considered compartmentalized and expunged, were now subjects of public inquiry. The name Echo Ridge became a political grenade. No one wanted to touch it, but everyone was watching to see who'd get hit next. Eden Wolfe didn't attend the sentencing. She watched it from a bench outside the Veterans Affairs building, a black baseball cap pulled low over her face, earbuds feeding her the monotone report of the judge's ruling. When the word guilty landed for the 3rd time, she took a slow sip of stale vending machine coffee, then tossed the cup into the trash without a word. Inside the building, a ceremony was waiting for her. The Department of Defense had insisted on rectifying the record. That meant formal recognition of her service, an official discharge reversal, and the posthumous honors she never asked for. Someone had even pressed her old insignia into a velvet-lined case. A woman in a crisp uniform met her at the entrance. Colonel Madison Reese, all clean protocol and awkward reverence. "They're ready for you, ma'am." Eden didn't move, dropped the ma'am. Reese hesitated, understood. Wolfe, not that either, just Eden. Inside the room, a modest podium had been set up. Flags, seal, cameras, a row of polished brass, hoping this would be enough. Eden stood before them in a plain black jacket and jeans. No makeup, no ribbons. The Secretary of the Army cleared his throat and began reading from a folder filled with paragraphs of praise that sounded like they were written by a committee trying not to sound like a committee, for extraordinary service in high-risk operational theaters, demonstrating valor under classified engagements. Eden's eyes didn't move. She stared ahead like she was watching something burning far off in the distance. When it was her turn to speak, she stepped forward, ignored the prepared remarks handed to her, and said simply, "You can't restore a name by stapling it to a medal." There was silence. "I didn't come here for recognition. I came here to make sure no one else gets buried in a lie." She paused. "You want to honor what we did? Then declassify the missions, all of them. Let the families know where their sons and daughters actually died. Stop hiding the truth behind ribbons and acronyms." She left the podium to a room frozen in discomfort. Outside, Colonel Reese followed her to the steps. "You're declining the reinstatement package?" "Yes." "You're still owed back pay. Rank, clearance." Eden gave a half smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You can keep the paperwork. I kept my soul." And with that, she walked away, past the flags, past the seals, past the theater of apology, towards something she still hadn't named. But she knew this much: she wasn't done. The memorial wall was quiet at this hour, just wind and shadow and the steady hum of the city far beyond the trees. Tucked deep inside Arlington's lesser-known quadrant was a section of polished black granite with no tour groups, no photo ops. It held no official title, just coordinates etched into the back corner, barely visible. The names on it weren't arranged by rank or order of death. They were carved by hand, uneven, as though whoever inscribed them didn't want perfection, just permanence. There were 16 names, no ranks, no branches, just names. The world didn't know them, but Eden did. She knelt slowly before the wall, one knee resting on the cool stone tiles, and placed a small token in front of the center name, a single bullet casing, polished and silent. It belonged to Caleb Reyes. Bravo entry, first to fall. Her hand hovered briefly over the name before pulling back. Behind her, leaves rustled. A few visitors strolled through, one with a camera slung over his chest, another in civilian clothes with veteran's posture. No one lingered near her, except one. A teenage boy, maybe 16, stood a few yards off, backpack slung carelessly over one shoulder, sneakers scuffed, eyes narrowed as if trying to place something just out of memory. Eden stood and adjusted the strap of her worn canvas bag. She hadn't worn a uniform in over a decade, but she still moved like a soldier, precise, composed. As she turned, the boy stared directly at her, then at her shoulder, where the collar of her jacket had slipped just enough to reveal a sliver of ink. Black triangle, cracked circle, faint but unmistakable. His eyes widened. He didn't speak right away, just took a half step forward, voice soft, disbelieving. "That tattoo." Eden stopped. His voice shook. "My uncle had the same one. I found it in an old photo. No one ever explained what it meant. They said he died in a training accident, but..." He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded photo, creased from too much handling. He offered it with hesitation. Eden took it. In the photo, a group of soldiers in desert fatigues, grinning, arm in arm, and there, on the shoulder of one man, dark and vivid even in black and white, was the mark. Eden stared at it for a long time. "He was in X-12, she said quietly. "One of the best." The boy swallowed hard. "Why didn't anyone tell us?" She handed the photo back, her gaze steady. "Because the truth is dangerous to the people who keep power by hiding it." He looked down at the wall. "You knew him?" She nodded. "Did he die well?" Eden thought of the flashbangs, the smoke, the bloody dirt under their knees, the way he'd smiled through broken teeth as he handed her his last magazine. "Yes," she said. "He died saving people no one else would have saved." The boy blinked fast and wiped at one eye. Eden turned to leave. "Wait," he called after her. "Are there more of you?" She paused, then answered without turning around. "There were..." And then she walked on, into the breeze, into the hum of distant traffic, into the world that had once buried her and now watched, uncertain, as she walked free. Not for recognition, not for revenge, but to ensure that the names carved in secret would never be forgotten again. She didn't look back. The world had already buried her once, but now Eden Wolfe walked forward. Not as a ghost from a forgotten war, but as a living reminder that silence is never safer than truth. And if you ever see someone with a faded triangle inked just beneath their shoulder, don't ask what it means. Some stories were never meant to be told, but they deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching this story to the very end. If Eden Wolfe's journey stirred something in you, we'd love to hear it. What would you have done in her place? Would you forgive or fight? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe to Veteran Biker for more stories of courage, betrayal, and redemption. And if you want more, just click one of the videos now appearing on your screen. Each one dives deeper into the unseen world behind the uniform. We'll see you in the next mission.